Call to order, Public Health Hospital District Number 4, King County Board of Commissioners work study. It is Wednesday, October 24th, 2018 at 6 p.m. and we are in Snoqualmie Valley Hospital. Would the clerk call the order? Flexible first.
President Norris?
Here.
Vice President Herron? Secretary Spikers? Expected, I guess. Commissioner Pollard?
Here.
And Commissioner Young?
Here.
Thank you.
We'll note when he comes in. Okay. Are we ready for the flag salute? Would everybody stand, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, we do a roll call? Yeah, we did. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion, additions, or anything to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Do we have any public comment? No public comment. So we will move on to our topics of discussion.
Here.
Commissioner Spikers has entered our presence.
I heard you about that.
At 6:05, we might know.
Don't worry, everyone.
Oh, okay. How about you?
We'll keep going. I'm good.
Okay, all righty. Introduction to the 2019 budget.
Okay, let me just, for the sake for all the commissioners here, so we can focus on, on the bylaws that we're going to be discussing
But
tonight.
we're doing the
Yeah,
budget
but-
first.
Budget's
Budget
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Sorry,
the budget, but we
okay.
need to do
Sorry
budget.
about that. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that is.
Steve, I believe.
Is here.
There he is, okay, there you
He's
go.
glad he doesn't talk about bylaws. Okay, so, I want to give you an overview of where we are with the 2019 budget. The Finance Committee met yesterday and went over it, and so suggested, let's go over it with the commissioners. We want to make you very familiar with it. Major budget assumptions, we assumed no affiliation-related increase in patient volumes, because we're not affiliated yet. We, however, did, so no revenue associated with the affiliation is in the budget. We did budget for affiliation-related expense for the project, outside, probably lawyers and accountants, $200,000 in consulting and legal expense. I did a little bit of research. I called our CPAs and said, 6-month process, what do you think is a fair price? And he said, $200,000 is about right for a 6-month affiliation process. Anticipate full staffing of the executive team, even though our CEO is departing. We still have budget money in there for our CEO all year. Conservative patient volumes. Basically, volumes are flat from 2018 to 19, except for imaging. And I'm going to have Tom talk a few times about the increase in imaging of 5%, because he says it much better than I do.
I don't know about that. The imaging team in the last year has had quite a bit of a turnover, and we've also had a number of weeks in the current year where our imaging equipment was in repair, and so this turnover that we had this year was not like most turnover. It was staff that, well, I'll just characterize it this way. The staff that we have on board now are very much attuned to how to grow our business and how to accommodate the schedule in order to get as many patients served as possible. And we didn't always have that in every one of our modalities in the past, but with some of our new staff, particularly in MRI and in ultrasound, we have people here who are really working hard to create a great customer experience, to get people in that at times that are most convenient for the patients, and And for that reason, we believe that our volumes were down this year compared to where they were in 2017. And now with our new team all together, really, what I would say is that we've had a culture change in medical imaging. And we believe that we'll be able to have a 2019 with at least 5% more. We believe that's a conservative number, and you'll see that that's the theme throughout these assumptions. We've tried to be conservative and not put in here volumes or revenue that we don't think we can achieve.
I have a question. When we have staff turnovers like that, isn't there additional expense to orientation and stuff? Isn't there a cost related directly to orienting new staff and getting them on board?
There is a lot of times with that. Fortunately for us, in this case, we have lead technologists in both MRI and in ultrasound who have worked with us in the past.
So they were.
So our current MRI tech, who also does X-ray and CT, we call them triple threats, and they're hard to find. But he worked for us for some time, and he wanted to come back into this area. He has family in this area and saw the opportunity, and he jumped at it. He is great with customers and knows our equipment and knows our processes. And then in ultrasound, our lead there is a technologist, ultrasonographer, who already was with us. She was per diem, and she wanted to convert to full-time.
Thank you.
I just want to also note that we're down for probably nearly a month for repairs. So
That's
that
true,
alone
too.
is that's
Yeah.
4%
Yeah.
right there.
100%.
Yeah, that's right on. MRI was
That's right.
took the hit there, yeah.
Patient volumes, just as you can see, no increase except for the bottom is at 5%. And the bottom middle, that's imaging. The rest, outpatient, inpatient, and clinics are flat. The salary increases. We looked at data on what our salaries doing in the area. The Seattle Consumer Price Index, there are two versions, an I and a U, both about 3%. Milliman, which is a consulting firm that collects salary data, very detailed salary data for healthcare in this area, forecasts a 3% increase in healthcare in this area. They actually poll providers such as ourselves saying, what are you planning to give? And so we built into our budget an overall 3% increase. That doesn't mean everybody gets a 3% increase. We kind of divide that up. If an employee is lower in the salary range, they get a higher increase. Higher in the salary range, lower, we want to move people to the midpoint of the salary range. And the midpoint is the salary that a fully competent individual, experienced and such, gets for that job. So that's where we've ended up on salaries.
What
And
does
you
you,
check- I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
what does you, CPI, but I know that's Consumer Price Index, U stands for and W stands for?
Urban and worker.
Oh,
Yes.
urban and rural?
Worker.
Oh, when, okay.
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
Okay, thank
It's very
you.
interesting. I did a little research.
Oh, okay, thank you.
CPIU and CPIW.
Uh-huh,
And
yes, thank you, sorry.
I imagine you checked with Kittitas County to see what their plan was?
They're about 3% too. Yeah, I know their CFO.
Okay.
Yeah. Benefits, health insurance and such. We used our current plan plus 8%, which is the renewal quote in our budget. We also went what's called going to market, got other bids. Aetna declined to quote. Cigna quoted a self-insurance only plan. I think I told the Finance Committee I had such lack of fun when we were self-insured. I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, you did tell us that.
Regents Blue Shield declined to quote. The Washington County's Insurance Fund declined to quote. United Healthcare quoted above our renewal cost, and Kaiser quoted. We analyzed it and did not make sense. Go back, what does decline to quote mean? Decline to quote means the insurance company looks at it, they know what our current prices are, And they say, yeah, we don't want to, in essence, take the time to quote because we won't be competitive. And Kaiser, interesting, we don't have a contract with Kaiser, we have tried. And if we would not have Kaiser, we would lose revenue of $185,000 from our own employees that come in our service
If
year.
you did not have Kaiser?
If we went with Kaiser, I'm sorry,
I can tell you our experience with Kaiser recently, they are not easy to work with.
I've kind of heard that too.
Yeah,
so.
they're not, even for the patients.
Yes, so that's where our benefits end.
Could you clarify, I didn't understand, may not make sense, I don't get that.
They wouldn't pay
Decline
the
to quote?
reimbursement. They wouldn't pay the
Yeah,
reimbursement
they
that
would
we,
not,
for
Wait,
our
let
employees.
me hear it from whoever's.
It went through the finance committee and
Yeah, I know,
very
but
capable
I
of
couldn't
answering
attend
it.
that, I wasn't allowed to attend that. Go ahead.
okay.
Steve, go ahead.
What Commissioner Spiker said is true, is we do not have a contract with Kaiser. In other words, Kaiser patients cannot come see us. If we had our own employees on a Kaiser plan, they could not come and get their healthcare services here. That would be a reduction in revenue, net revenue to us of $185,000. Because a lot of our employees come here, it's more convenient for them. That's-
Well, I don't understand. If we had a contract with Kaiser to provide health insurance for our employees,
We don't, we have
I said
tried,
if we did.
okay, but we cannot get one. We have tried in the past and they have declined. They have a very narrow network of providers, and we are not one. They want to contract.
Go there.
Well, my experience has been Kaiser is much better to work with than Premera. I have practitioners who refuse to work with Premera anymore. because-
We probably all have different experiences with
Evercore,
different companies in various industries. So, okay. Expense budgets, supplies, another we used specific expense or inflation factors based on the type of supply and did not increase our cost. For instance, pharmaceuticals will increase at a higher price than general supplies, so we applied those percentages. Staffing levels, we have very detailed meetings with our managers where we go over and plan out by employee, not named employee, but position, the staffing for a department for next year. What do you need to provide service? Department level expenses, travel, training and as such, the same thing. Every manager works with the executive team, the controller and the CFO, and we budget their department expenses. But it's not top down. They're saying, we need this to keep going. We have to approve it. Medicare daily rate, which is the rate we get for swing death and acute care patients from Medicare, our biggest revenue source, we used $2,747 a day, which is the most recent rate from our cost report here. So we're confident in that. Price increases, we.
Question.
Yeah,
Now, is this our full cost reimbursement figure?
that's how we get our cost reimbursement is the Medicare daily rate thing.
So that is full cost reimbursement for all
That's-
the activities for inpatient.
Right, as you may recall, we get paid
99%.
99%
So always
of the
compare
cost
that
of
to-
service to Medicare patients by Medicare. That's what they mean by cost-based reimbursement.
I think that what used to be about 4,300, so this has dropped significantly.
It has dropped, it was in the $3,000-4,000 range. It has dropped as we became more efficient. And that's kind of one of the conundrums of cutting expenses with cost-based reimbursement. As you reduce expenses, you reduce your Medicare reimbursement rate. Doesn't mean you shouldn't reduce expenses, but you've got to factor that in as you do projections and such.
Thank you.
Thank you. Price increases, hospital related services 5%, clinics 0. These programs are relatively new. The 340B drug program, we've been doing it for about 5-6 months. And what revenue did we use? We used $204,000, which is our current rate, about $17,000 a month. So if you remember, we started that, we budgeted that last year, but we had not been doing the program, not been participating. And so we did an estimation, we were a little high. Now we have a very good figure for that. Rural health clinics, we just got certified as a rural health clinic. And so we want to know, okay, what is the increase in net revenue going to be from our attaining the rural health clinic status? And we will get paid the first year what's called the state average encounter rate. That means for every visit by a Medicaid patient, we will get a certain dollar amount. And what we will, that state average, acknowledged by the state, is $138. However, the true average, if you average it, and our cost preparer did, it's $175. But we'll probably get $138. We're trying to get the state to say, okay, recalculate the average, you get $175, we use $138. So that is $271,000 increase in net revenue from the rural health program. Yes?
What are we getting now, before we got into the rural health clinic, what were we being reimbursed for
we're
Medicaid
getting-
people?
I don't know the exact rate, it depends on the service, but we're getting, for the same patient volume, before the program, we were getting $271,000 less for servicing Medicaid patients.
Yeah, I'm thinking of an individual Medicaid patient.
I do not have that off the top of my head.
Here, we're
Nor would I expect
talking
myself
about
to.
$138
I-
for an individual.
Gene, I honestly.
No, I mean what you've got up here.
That's what we will get from, about a week ago on, we will get $138 per encounter.
Okay, is it reasonable to assume that that's about what we've been getting anyway?
No, we've been getting less, because that rate gives us annually $271,000 more in net revenue.
But you don't recall what we're getting now.
It
Depends on the
varies by
service,
service, and I wouldn't expect myself to remember.
Okay, thank you.
I know what a physiatrist. I haven't been there, but I know.
Okay.
It's $212.10, but
So but it is a net
that's a
increase in
special.
revenue. Yeah.
no,
That is a specialist.
yeah.
So, and in order to get the 175, we would have to get the healthcare authority to change its mind. And the healthcare authority is very difficult to get them to change their minds. We've tried on various things. So I could say, it's kind of a land of, this is not my job, talk to somebody else. So, okay. So what does the budget look like? We have, if you go down to the bottom, net income of $192,000. And I want you to remember that that includes $200,000 for the affiliation project.
But it does not, I mean, that pretty much is what you're absorbing the CEO.
See, full salary of the CEO is in there.
Okay.
So it's
Plus
like Tom didn't leave. So
Plus
it's right-
200,000?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
okay, all right.
So you told him the salary.
Even though the budget's in there, Tom still says he's leaving, so you can't do anything about that. But, so, you look at the difference, probably about 260, 270,000. We know, we anticipate being in an interim phase for 3 months to 4 months to 5 months, something like that. So,
Is it possible that we could get Kroger to be able to apply for their 340B drug program?
that's their decision, and what they have right now is a halt on applying. If they open it up, yes, and that would increase the 340B revenue
Significant.
significantly. I mean, we'd probably go up.
They keep giving us, okay, we need 3 more months, so the next window is January.
Okay, so that's the next,
So-
okay.
All right. Thank you for the quick review of the budget. That's where we are. Any questions, comments?
Are there any questions for our CEO,
Mr.
Chief
Ballard?
Financial Officer?
Yeah, not about the data, but what are the plans for briefing the commissioners before the budget hearing? Is this the only meeting
No.
we're going to have?
you'll see me again on the 8th, and you'll see me again at the budget hearing.
Okay, well, the 8th is our meeting, is that
Yeah.
correct? And then the next day is the budget hearing?
No, the week later.
A week
15th.
later?
The
Okay.
15th.
So
Yeah.
the only opportunities we have to discuss the budget is tonight and on the 8th.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
And I wanted to give you kind of a peek so you can think about questions, and we can go in a little more depth on the 8th, because I know you have bylaws to do tonight.
Okay.
And I'm sure that Steve is very open, and so is Tom, concerning any questions
Yeah.
from an individual commissioner. So you have 15 days before the budget meeting to speak with them or request information.
Want a meeting, meet with you, you know.
Question,
Yes.
I know what flat means, but can you explain why you use that word flat from? Is it less than
No, it means equal to.
or equal
The
to?
same.
Same, okay.
Same as this year.
It's a finance guy.
Okay.
It's a finance guy term, we say
Bingo,
that.
huh? Okay, good, thank you.
Very
There's no
conservative.
ripples, no ups, no downs.
Yeah. No ups or downs, yep.
So good.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Nice job, Steve. All right, here we go.
Okay, next on our agenda, and thank you, Steve, very much.
Thank you.
We have review of the draft bylaw revisions. Who is going to take the lead on that?
I'll just have to say a few words. The Ad hoc Commissioners Bylaws Committee would like to ask Mr. Parker, our CEO, to moderate this session so that we all commissioners will focus on the bylaws. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you. Okay, Tom.
I'm going to move my position here, just so I can see everybody a little bit better. We're going to, you have the bylaws that were provided to you at our board meeting. And if you need a copy, we've got copies, right?
They have.
Everybody has copies, and I've got
Good.
lots of extras.
Awesome.
I've got mine from before that I can.
So what we'll do, you've got the red line version, like we did for the rules of procedure, we're gonna go through in sections here, and we're going to solicit your input. And Skip is gonna be writing furiously to capture that information, just like we did last time. And that is really helpful to the ad hoc committee, as it goes back then, Skip pulls all that together for the committee and then produces an updated version of it, which we call now what's called a red line, blue line version of the document. We actually have a red line, blue line version of the rules of procedure. Remember, we got your feedback at the last work study, and then your feedback resulted in a version of the rules of procedure that incorporates your input. That's the blue line, and you're going to get a copy of that tonight at the end here. But we're tonight focusing just on the bylaws. So we're gonna start out, and we'll just take turns like we did last time. I'm going to ask you for your input, and Skip is going to scribe as much as he can here. So we're going to go to page 1 of the bylaws. This is we're going to start with Article 2, called Board of Commissioners, and under Section 1, called Qualification and Election, we have some new language in there where all district commissioners shall be entitled to any other benefits as provided by the RCW and as amended. This just is clarifying and making it clear that the benefits that you're currently receiving are that's reflected in the bylaws that actually can happen. So I'm going to start with Commissioner Pollard and move down the line, and then I'll start with Joan and so on. So Commissioner Pollard, do you have any thoughts on that section?
Well, just as a matter of form, after we quote the RCW there, I think it would be more appropriate to put a comma as amended rather than and as amended. Just as a matter of form, my preference, I don't know what others feel about that, but I think the appropriate way is 70-44-050, comma as amended.
I agree.
Yeah, I do too. Great.
Good catch, Jean.
Anything else, Jean, on that section?
On that, on just section one, no, that's all I have for
Okay,
section
Joan,
one.
anything on that? No. Commissioner Spikers?
I agree.
Oh, that's, yeah, okay. Emma
No.
and Daryl.
Yeah, I agree with
Okay, we will move on to section 2. In section 2, this talks about the board officers, and I'm going to split the red line into 2 versions. So the first one I'm going to ask your feedback on is just this first paragraph, and this is where the service as an officer is limited to 2 consecutive 2-year terms. And so let's start with Joan and get your feedback on, the next section is really the process of the election, so we won't go into that right now, but we're just talking about the term limit. Joan, any thoughts on that?
I think this is a good plan.
Okay, thank you. David?
Well, I think it's a good plan, but with respect to the treasurer, I think that's kind of a very specific technical post that I think every commissioner should be able to go to those meetings, but to chair them and have the understanding is going to be kind of difficult, I think, for some of the commissioners. But I don't have any real big comments. I'm just wondering what, as far as getting work done, I'm not sure how that would work. And, if someone wants to be the treasurer, that have at it, but I think that might be a little difficult to begin with. Maybe have a co-chair with a new treasurer to kind of help out might help. But I'm not sure, because I would be willing to help out, or Dario would, who became the treasurer, but I think they're gonna need some help. I think that's what I'm
Good point.
thinking.
Okay.
Could I piggyback on that? Maybe an option is that for 1 year, you sit next to the presiding treasurer and listen to how the meeting goes, and then by that time, the next year, that person could move off and then somebody new could show
Yeah,
on.
it's-
Just a little training, kind of.
Just the transition,
Yeah.
that's a little more, the budget and monthly looking at things is very intricate. It took me a long time, and I'm not,
Yeah.
some people call me dumb, but I mean,
Ooh.
it took me, it took me a
Yeah.
long time to get to know what is going on. And it took me several years, actually, probably 3 or 4.
Good. I'm going to keep going down. I think we've captured that. Great,
Okay.
great input. Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask Emma now for your thoughts.
I agree with Commissioner Spikers in terms of, the treasurer position, because it is challenging, and I know what it takes to really understand the budget. The consecutive terms, I agree that would be a better plan. That might consider treasurer would be a different angle.
Okay.
I
Okay.
didn't understand that, but what did the commissioner say?
The red marked area is what she's talking about, correct, Emma? Is that what you're talking about right
Yes.
there? Page 1, the bottom red line.
Yeah, I understand, but I'd like to hear what
I
she
agree
said.
that 2 consecutive
Speak a little
terms.
louder, could you?
I agree with 2 consecutive terms
Limited
of
to
2
2
years.
consecutive
Yeah,
terms. All right.
with the exception, of course, what Commissioner Spikers was talking about, the treasurer's
Treasurer may be
position.
different. That was your thought.
Right?
Treasurer may be different.
Yes,
consistent with,
yes,
what,
that was my comment.
What David said.
Yeah,
Okay, very good.
is that clear?
Thank
Is that
you.
clear, Commissioner Pollard?
Yeah, thank you.
Dario, do you have any other thoughts as I continue down the line here?
No, I think that probably the budget is probably the hardest, the checking account, just looking at that.
Very good.
I think for all the others, and particularly President, Vice President, Secretary, I think it's nice if we all can have some opportunity to try other positions and not keep the same person. And I feel particularly about the presidency. I think the president, 2 years, and then I think moving on, it would be,
Very good. Consistent with And Commissioner Pollard?
Yeah, I am weighing the benefit of bringing in new blood to the efficiency of having the old office holder continue. And I think we need to start bending towards bringing in new blood and having a change of officers. I understand what Mr. Spiker is saying, and from the standpoint of efficiency, I think that's absolutely true. But I just like to see us have a more turnover than have people sort of homestead in these positions. Now, on the next page, the last part of this statement.
Well, we're not to that yet.
This is still section 2.
Yeah, it is. It goes on, it goes to the next page, the top of the next
I'm
page.
talking about the top of the next page.
I'm sorry, correct. Yeah, okay.
And this is just, again, a matter of form. I think that after the statement of are eligible to return to a prior office after having served 2 consecutive terms, and insert the word "and" upon sitting out that position for 1 term. So
Very good.
Even though I prefer the turnover as opposed to homesteading, it just as a technical comment, the word "and" I think should be in there.
Good, thank
Good
you
catch.
very much. Okay, we're going to move on now to this next section, which is really very much a process related to the election. One could say that it, it kind of feels like the first document, which is our rules of procedure, but this is about electing our officers, and so it really is appropriate to be in this section. It is a mouthful. I'm not going to read this whole section. You've had a chance to have it in your possession, so if you have any thoughts on it, certainly let us know at this point, and we'll start with Commissioner Spikers.
Well, I'm just reading this for the first time, so I don't know when did this come to us?
The last board.
That's board meeting.
Okay. I guess I
You
didn't.
didn't get it.
No, I don't think I got it last time somehow. I knew you were gonna pass it out. So can I pass on this until the end, to the rest of it?
Absolutely. In fact, if you'd like to, the committee will take your input as well if you want to email
I
something.
can just
Okay.
have the other
Go-
commissioners
keep going
comment.
around. You got it.
And I'll
Okay.
comment the last.
All right. Commissioner Herron.
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. President Norris.
I didn't understand what we said by the clerk. The board shall be conducted by the clerk to the board at the direction and request of the president. I didn't
Valerie
understand.
serves as our clerk.
Clerk, so
Correct.
what is that saying, that she appoints them, or?
No, she just facilitates the election.
That makes perfect
She's the
sense, yeah.
facilitator.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think, one thing I think about president is we need a handbook for the president.
Could you speak a little louder?
We need a handbook for the responsibilities of the president, so we're clear. And the vice president should probably see it too, so that they know what, if the president's gone, what the expectations are. Just a little brief something.
That actually came up in our committee work, and so that's consistent with some of the discussion we had even as late as yesterday. And so that's something that perhaps we have a new section in the bylaws that says that orientation handbook will be provided for officers for their positions.
I think that might be a good idea.
Okay, good.
So there is a typo in the first line that we didn't catch, and where it says the election of the president of the board shall be conducted by the clerk, not to the board, but of the board. It'll be conducted by the clerk of the board, and the clerk is
Oh,
Valerie,
right,
so that
clerk.
two should be of, and we'll catch that. That's one that
Oh,
Commissioner Pollard didn't
yes.
catch. He's been catching most of our typos, and
You haven't gotten it?
this is only one time. He would have caught it, I'm sure.
I don't know.
Okay, all right, thank you, President Norris. Commissioner Pollard.
Well, I think it's too bad that you didn't read it and we take it almost line by line.
Oh,
But at any rate, just on the third line, I think it should read for election of the board, not elections of the board's officers, okay? That would be my suggestion.
Well, the
Yeah.
only thing we elect,
Well,
sorry,
Be an agenda item for the election or
isn't
for
it the only
elections
thing
of
we
the?
really
Or election,
elect?
I think it would be singular, for elections.
Election.
It's probably just a matter of style and form,
Okay.
but I.
Who all do we
I
elect? Do we
think it's
just
a-
elect the president?
I think, yeah, we're totally agreeing with you.
Yeah.
For example, you know, we have an election and that'll, you know, our national election elects a lot of different people.
So we don't say election.
We don't say elections, so, yeah, good catch.
Okay.
So,
To Commissioner Howard, he's gonna pick that stuff up.
now, when we talk about the clerk of the board, are we talking about Valerie? Is that her title?
Correct, she has that title as well.
Okay. Now, with respect to the comment that was just made about the duties of the various officers, I wonder if the duties shouldn't be like a job description and included in the bylaws. Just like we have the duties of the CEO or the superintendent spelled out, as I recall in the bylaws.
They're only, they're briefly down here, but it would be, I think where you're headed is something that's much more robust than what we see here.
Yeah, Mr. Spikers, I think, made a good point that if somebody comes in these positions, it's very tough to know. I think a little more detail about the duties of each position would be helpful. But it's not critical, but it is that.
I think that's consistent with what we were talking about in the committee and what we heard from President Norris is orientation materials would be very helpful.
And
Okay.
that might be a handbook when you get oriented that tells you those things. What do you think?
Okay.
I remember that it
I think so.
describes them
Yeah,
all.
I think we need a whole section here on job description and orientation. Okay, other thoughts on this
Well,
section of the process?
On this paragraph?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
I very much object to this concept that the board's current vice president shall be automatically nominated for the position of president. I think it should be up to those who nominate, and it should not be an automatic nomination of vice president. Perhaps the vice president hasn't done a good job. Perhaps they've done an outstanding job, but regardless, I think it should be left to the nomination process. I really find that very unusual, and I doubt there's any other organization that does it that way.
Actually, there are quite a few.
Yeah,
that do
there are a
that.
lot
But,
that
yeah.
do that
Can you
succession.
give me
Yeah.
one example?
The American Hospital Association,
ITE,
Okay,
Institute
I'll
of
check
Traffic
that out.
Engineers.
Thank you.
yeah. the,
Well, at any rate, I oppose it.
They do it, I'm sorry, but they do a chair, so they have a chair-elect, they have a chair, and they have past chair, and that creates the continuity. They always have 3 people there in those seats, and they flow through.
Well, that's a totally different system, but when you're talking about president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, et cetera, I just think there should be no automatic nomination. It should be done
Okay.
each year. So
Thanks for that input.
I like the idea that a commissioner may nominate themselves. That's unusual for me. I'm having to quickly go back and read this. I don't know, the detail is a little bit too much for me
It is
to
a lot of detail.
to scan it at this point and make sense. I don't know. At any rate, let's just take that as my comments at the moment. I just feel that it's I feel it's unusual, and I would guess that other public hospital districts do not have that provision in their bylaws or in their procedures that the vice president is automatically nominated for president. I think that should be up to the board at the time.
Okay, got it. Yep, thank you very much. Yep, Skip's got it. Joan? Okay, and back around to you, David.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a procedural conundrum here. I think there's too many steps to do anything, to get anything done.
In the election process?
Yeah, I don't like it. I think you should just be able to nominate somebody, and if that motion fails, then nominate somebody else. I don't mind having the automatic nomination from vice president and
Okay.
president. I don't mind that. I think that's a good way to keep things going around, but there's so many steps to get to somewhere what you need to do. It just
Okay.
seems to me that we're,
So I'm
We're
hearing,
not-
I'm hearing simplification.
yeah,
Work on
it's just not,
simplification.
it's too much work to get anywhere,
Okay,
so.
thank you. It is a long section, I totally
Yeah.
agree with that. Okay, we're gonna turn the page here, and we're gonna start with Emma on on section 2.6. And section 2.6, we've got a lot of added language here, and this is regarding excused absences. Now, Emma, you have the advantage of being on the ad hoc committee, but do you have any thoughts on this add of language?
So, we're compiling all three of these paragraphs that are redlined,
This is
correct?
all new language.
All three of them, yeah. So if, okay, so it has to be excused even if, so what is tardiness called?
I don't believe that we
We don't
addressed-
have it, we didn't address that
We
here.
addressed lateness, we just addressed.
Lateness,
um,
that's my,
What is an excused absence?
yeah,
Tardiness is not an absence, because they appeared,
yeah,
so we didn't address it by design.
okay. Is it, what's excuse would be, if I'm
Excused
gonna be
is
late,
if
I'll
you
say
are-
by the way.
If you are absent, you didn't attend, or you left and therefore became absent at that time.
Oh, okay, so we don't
That's-
have anything about being
We
late?
do not have
So we
anything
can
about-
come late and we're still present, correct?
You would be identified
We're
as
still present.
arriving and being present at a specific time in the minutes, and you would
Oh.
reflect in the minutes, the commissioner arrived at 6:01.
Okay.
And
So
wouldn't
there-
that mean also, may I have the floor on to ask a
Yeah,
question?
she made the,
Then to make that parallel, wouldn't one also enter the time that the commissioner departed?
Correct.
And so it is possible for a commissioner to get credit for the meetings if they arrive late and depart early, as long as it's noted in the minutes, is that correct?
That is correct, except for on the departure, you must also receive the acquiescence or permission of being excused by the commission if you leave early. That's in the third paragraph.
And so, do people have to be excused for when they arrive late?
No,
Well, I think that would be parallel.
understood. I'll make that note.
Okay.
Commissioner Herring had a comment.
Commissioner Herron, it's still your turn.
Yeah, I know, I didn't yield to Commissioner Pollard.
No, that's okay, but he asked
okay.
for it and got
Yeah.
permission from the president, so go ahead, Emma, what else?
I guess, well, that's all, that's okay.
Thank you
I'm
very
fine.
much.
Thank
Are
you.
you sure you didn't?
I'm fine.
President Norris, thoughts on this section?
I hadn't read it thoroughly, and parts of this I have. I think this, as long as the chair says when they come in or when they leave, I mean, if somebody's late, you just acknowledge that they are entered the room and what time it is.
Okay.
Things happen like that, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. As long as it's, I think it is if it's not excused unless there's a reason that comes up later that was significant enough that they could not notify us or let us know.
I'm sorry, I can't, we don't have, we have a PA system set up, and I'm down here at the end.
We're
So-
talking about if somebody comes in late or doesn't show up, but mostly doesn't come in, when they come in late,
Yeah.
just to say that, acknowledge when they arrive, and like I usually do, to say that
Yeah.
a commissioner is present at that time. You never know if traffic or something's
Oh,
going to
sure.
slow them down.
I agree, and this is not to criticize Commissioner Spikers, but tonight he arrived at 5 minutes past, and you called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock.
Well, that's what I thought it said, yeah. Oh, he got here after we started?
I don't think it was 5 after, because I was hearing, I was
Yeah, we
listening
were
to the
already
Pledge of
started.
Allegiance out in the hall.
Okay.
I'm just saying that,
Yeah,
let
okay.
us log in the exact time that the person who arrives late comes in.
I probably didn't say that because we were doing the pledge.
Listen to the recording, but we had already started.
Well, let's
Okay,
focus on
that's-
these words. So what is your suggestion?
My suggestion is if somebody isn't here and is late, the chair just says, Commissioner, whoever it is, A, has just arrived, it is such and such a
You know
time.
the time and you
Yeah.
want it in the minutes.
Yeah, you just put in
Got it.
minutes that they're here.
Well,
And when
can
they're
I
ready.
also make a
No,
comment?
No, I'm good, I've got to keep order. Are you
Okay.
done?
Yeah, I am, for the
Commissioner
moment.
Pollard.
I just think that if a person leaves, there may be all kinds of reasons that a person needs to leave. Some of them may be private, and I don't think that the person should have to divulge what that is. If a commissioner chooses to leave early, I think it should just be noted that Commissioner so-and-so departed at so-and-so. It doesn't have to be excused or unexcused.
Got that feedback. Thank you very much for that. All right, it seems like there's a lot more discussion that wants to occur on this, so I'm just gonna keep going round robin style. I'm gonna go through the circuit here. Joan, do you have anything
I'm
else?
I'm listening to all of this. I wonder if there needs to be some kind of acknowledgement if you're going to be late or want to be excused. Is it, you need to let somebody know prior to the meeting time.
Okay,
Is that not anywhere else in the minutes, or in the, because I thought at one time it was that you had to let them know that you were going to be.
there is a provision, that's the second sentence of that first red line paragraph, where it says a member requesting to be excused from a
Yes.
meeting shall notify the president or the clerk of the board of the anticipated absence. One would presume that that happens before the meeting occurs, and I think it's reasonable to assume that.
But point of order, but that's if you're going to miss the whole meeting. Now, if a person, for whatever reason, maybe they have private reasons,
Okay?
choose to leave a meeting early after having arrived later on time, then the question is, does that person have to get permission from the board to leave early? And I think it shouldn't be necessary. The person could just be noted as having left.
It's not addressed here.
It is addressed there.
Oh.
In the last paragraph, it says, if you leave the meeting prior to adjournment, you request the commission be excused for the remainder of the meeting. And again, it's just a determination in the minutes as to whether or not you're excused. You could always leave the meeting. It's just that if you left, you would be noted as absent for the remainder of the meeting without being excused by the board.
Thank you.
Whereas if you asked to leave, then the board would vote on whether or not they excuse you. And then the minutes would say, you were excused by the board.
What practical effect is that? For example, if you miss a meeting and you're not excused, you will be docked pay. If you leave before the end of a meeting and you would be considered unexcused, how does that, in practical terms, affect you?
I suspect if you, in reality, do dock pay, and I don't know that that's occurring, but if somebody was unexcused and didn't attend the meeting, they wouldn't be provided compensation. If you left the meeting and you were unexcused, and I suspect you wouldn't be provided
I'm sorry, would
compensation.
you repeat that?
So I don't want to create debate here, but I'm just suggesting that if a member is, doesn't attend a meeting,
Right,
they can't turn in a compensation request or a stipend or a meeting.
agreed.
Right. If they leave the meeting and they're excused, they would be able to be compensated for that. If they arrived and then left 5 or 10 minutes and it doesn't show that they're being excused, they probably couldn't be compensated. But my legal opinion tells me, under the statute, if you appear for the meeting, whether you're excused or unexcused,
2
you
minutes.
probably get paid.
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna get
Yeah,
paid.
and I think.
So I'm just gonna finish the answer to your question.
Right.
The effect of it is that the minutes reflect it. So what you're gonna see really is a document that says excused or unexcused. So it's just a meeting minutes clarification.
Yeah.
That's all. And I think this came up, Commissioner Pollard, is because I think we had an issue in one meeting where you thought Commissioner Spiker shouldn't be excused, and you said, well, the chair doesn't have the authority to do that. So the bylaws ad hoc committee went to a great effort to try and come up with an approach here where this could occur, where the president could acknowledge it and it could be decided by the board. And this is what a lot of organizations do. We stole this, we grafted this from other organizations. I mean, we did some original work, but this is not one of them.
Okay, could I respond?
Oh, please, yeah.
Yeah, I just feel that if the person arrives late to the meeting, we'll assume, well, even if they arrive for only half of the meeting, that's regrettable, But I think it should just be noted that the person arrived at such and such a time, whenever they get here, okay? And then, in a parallel sense, I think if the person leaves 5 or 10 minutes early, not after 5 minutes, as you suggested, but 5 or 10 minutes early, for whatever reason, that it should just be noted in the minutes that we're mature people. We don't leave for spurious reasons, but we may want to leave for personal reasons. So I just think we should be trusted that we are responsible elected officials, and we should be able to leave the meeting also without seeking the approval of the rest of the board.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to keep going. Joan, I think you said nothing, and then we were at Commissioner Spikers. Did you have something, Joan?
No, what I
Okay.
said is, if you're going to be excused, you need to notify ahead of the meeting, perhaps call a clerk, Valerie, and say, can I be excused, or, how do you notify that you want to be excused?
It's a notification. In that second sentence in the first red line paragraph, it's notifying the president or the clerk, either one, that you are, and this is regarding presence or absence, that you are not able to make the meeting.
Is there any time?
We have not addressed tardiness in this section, only
No,
presence.
no.
I'm sorry,
I
I'm
guess
sorry.
if you want to be
Notice
excused,
requirement, how much notice
You
you
need
need.
to let
Thank
somebody
you.
know
Was not understood.
ahead of being
Yeah,
excused.
It's not, you're correct, it's not in here. So how far in advance you're saying do you have to notice? And we didn't address that, so.
Point of order, just for clarification, just to make sure that what Commissioner Young is saying, I think, has to do with the time frame, so that it doesn't become habitual that a person would just decide to leave that moment without,
No.
I don't know if that is something that.
Actually, what Joan's saying is that there's something in here that says you have to tell the clerk or the president before the meeting that you're gonna be absent. What she's asking is, how far in advance of the meeting do you need to notify the clerk or the president that you're going to be absent?
Okay.
Like the day before or a half hour.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not the spur of the
And
moment,
so-
I'm leaving
and so-
tonight.
And so what I'll also, we've captured that question, and we'll bring it back to the committee to
Okay.
try and deliberate on that. Is it specific to that
Yes,
point? Then thank
specific
you.
to that point. Let's imagine a person intends to come to the meeting. Let's say it's somebody from Carnation or Fall City, and they encounter unusual traffic. So they did not make give proper notice beforehand, a day or two or hours or whatever. But they simply cannot get here on time or even come to the meeting because of weather conditions, this, that, or the other thing. So in that case, I think a person should be able to be excused without having given notice.
Great
Prior
point.
notice.
Great point. Thank you for that input. That's very good input. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna keep going down the line, and we're now to Commissioner Spikers.
Okay, in the same line, I think I agree with Commissioner Pollard, because I may, one of the things by punishing commissioners, that's what I look at this as being a punishment. You're gonna see maybe the recruitment of other younger commissioners when they get load of this, when very busy people that may be just like me. I coach 5 days a week, my son's team, I have a full-time business, I'm a landlord, I'm on this board, and I do community service work in between, and in between my wife says I should probably spend more time and pay attention to her, so those are the things
I
that.
bet she's right.
So, younger people tend to be, not necessarily more busy, but they tend to have more commitments because of children. And you might want to tone it down a little bit. I don't mind having noted excuse or whatever it is, but giving notice, I may get a text from my wife at 8 o'clock thinking this is supposed to be over by 7 o'clock. And we're still in committee here. And she says, you've got to pick up Harmon right now. He's sitting at the rink. I'm not gonna be able to give notice until I get the text in the middle of the meeting. So I think the notice thing
Yeah.
should be just thrown out.
That's very similar to what Commissioner
Yeah,
Paul
so
was
that,
saying.
in the same line,
Yeah.
I
No,
said,
I'm
so,
just saying,
I'm giving you an example.
most of us
So-
are electronically connected, driving here or whatever, and you can dial a little number to the hospital and say, I had a flat tire.
I just carried call Daria.
He does.
Okay, good input, thank you so much. Commissioner Herron, do you have thoughts on this section?
I think it's almost like,
Oh, we started with you, actually.
but I do have
Come on,
comment.
all
It's almost
right.
like we're asking if I tell my employer, I'm sick, by the way, and my employer says, okay, I will need your medical doctor's, you know, because sometimes that's what happens, so that it prevents too many sick days.
Mhm.
So, on the third time you were sick in 1 week, then your doctor will, or your employer will say, you need to bring your doctors. And that just reminds me but
Okay.
that's just my comment.
Thank you very much. President, do you have other comments?
No, yeah, I just remember when the weather was bad and we were having a Christmas thing and, you know.
All right.
We had a lot of problems knowing whether it was gonna happen or not happen. I think calling each other and just checking in with Val or whoever we need to check in with should be enough.
Great, thank you.
Just one
Yes, of
comment.
course, we're gonna keep going around. Yeah, Commissioner
I
Paul.
was going to say, I don't think you can depend on people having cell phones.
That's
and
true
being
too.
able-
I agree.
The district did not issue us cell phones. I have a cell phone for only emergency purposes, and I don't use it for calls, normal calls.
Gotcha.
So if the district is wanting us to have smartphones, buy us smartphones. Otherwise, I don't think you can depend on people calling to give notice to Val or whomever.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just gonna do a kind of an all call now on any other comments on this section. Great, thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna turn a few pages here. The next section is on page 5, and President Norris, you're gonna be our first commenter on this. This is a section that is being added to the reasons why we can go into executive session, and this is actually just word for word taken out of the brand new RCW. I may actually, instead of having you I just may do an all call, because there's not much debate that can happen, or
I don't
input.
think so.
This is just right out of the RCW.
All three of these paragraphs are.
Well, This
Yeah.
new paragraph A is
Right,
every public hospital district is putting this into their bylaws when they redo their bylaws, because this came out this year. Okay, if there's no comments on that.
Comment.
Okay.
Question. When you say every public hospital district is putting this into their bylaws?
Well, they
Isn't it
should.
A?
I think he was speaking in general terms.
Well, I mean, this paragraph is, I think it's poorly written, frankly.
That's the legislature.
And that's what I'm asking.
Not enough attorneys there.
I'm asking if this is the wording stipulated by the legislature and all of the public hospital districts are doing it, and we're obliged to do it, there's nothing to discuss.
That's true.
But if indeed you're trying to get clarity that people can read and understand this, there's much to be desired in how this was written. That's my comment.
Thank you very much.
I'll make that.
Good. All right, then what we're gonna do is we'll keep going here. I'm gonna turn a couple of pages to page 7. And page 7, we're gonna start with President Norris on this. And this is regarding our committee meetings. And we're gonna take the body of of section 7 before we get down into the subgroups. Just section 7 alone before we get to 7.1. And this is a move from what we're doing now, where we have committee meetings that can be open to the public, to saying that committee meetings are not open public meetings. And so that's just that one line, and are not open public meetings. Now, I'll just mention, and Skip has brought quite a bit of the work that he has done on this topic. Skip's done a lot of research on this and has opinions from attorneys, including the MRSC, on the public or non-public nature of committee meetings. So maybe you want to pass around your,
Sure, I can do that.
your issue paper on that, but.
So I think we ended up doing like 23 different issue papers. This was issue paper number 7. And we created a binder. I brought the full 3-ring binder, but when the topic came up, the committee asked me to check with, and so I did. I checked with MRSC, I checked with a couple of the attorneys, and they just provided background on case law and concerns and issues, Supreme Court cases, Attorney General opinions, and attached is the statute, at least to the definitions. But in essence, most folks had a concern that when you have committee meetings, there is a potential for violations of the Open Public Meeting Act. And so the vast majority of municipalities and public entities don't have their committee meetings open to the public. You have done a good job in your bylaws identifying that those are advisory committees only. You don't take public testimony. You don't make decisions there, but they're open to the public. And because they're open to the public, there's the potential for the appearance anyway that you're making decisions there, or that if more than 2 commissioners there, you're creating a quorum. Even if one just sits back in the audience, we've heard that could create some history. So that's what we did with this issue paper. We brought that to the committee. The ad hoc committee felt that it was important to maintain the integrity of those committees and not create an appearance of impropriety. They felt that they would propose, as you'll see here, that these committee meetings would not be open to the public.
Okay, thank you, Skip. There's a lot in here, and I'm going to defer in some cases. If you have more questions for Skip as we go along on this topic, it's worth taking a little bit more time, and that's why we made sure that there were copies of this issue paper available, because we figured there may be some more in-depth questions on this item. President Norris, do you have any comments or questions on this?
No, I understand a lot of this. I've looked into it before, and I think this is probably a good idea. I think we've tried to make things open, but I'm not sure that we are doing it the best way we should. And I guess I don't think it should be open. I think we should keep them closed. And I've heard that from other entities.
Okay.
Other entities similar to ours,
Okay.
that they do not.
Point of clarification,
Yes.
can you cite any problems that there have been from having committee meetings open?
I think sometimes the information is not the total information. They get partial information. Sometimes, and they'll come up after and ask for more information because they don't know all the background.
Okay, okay, thank you. Commissioner Pollard, comments?
Pardon?
Comments or questions to Skip
Well,
about
this
the research?
flies in the face of advice I have in writing from MRSC, particularly Joe Levan, who is CEO of MRSC. And I find it amazing to think that the reason that you might want to close meetings is to avoid a possible violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, because actually what's going on in committee and then sailing through the board, I think from what Joe Levan, who's now the CEO or the attorney for the city of Bremerton since he resigned from MRSC, is a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act according to what he wrote. And I intended to send you that. I may have, I don't remember, but he did put in writing the concern there about how closed meetings can be a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act.
That would be good information to have coming back into the ad hoc committee. Would you send that?
Yeah,
forward to-
I think I can put my hands on that.
Very good.
And,
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Pollard. Commissioner Young, do you have thoughts on this?
Well, being a member of the ad hoc committee, I got to agree that if a third commissioner shows up at what is now labeled a public meeting, it can be looked at as having a quorum, and that makes it a violation.
But only if
Well,
the
that's
third
not-
person
Not your turn,
participates.
not
No,
Not
I'm
your turn.
getting
Go ahead.
feedback from
Well,
Joan.
It's kind of hard to know, I haven't gone to anybody else's meetings, but if you even make a sign that you agree with what's being said, then you're in violation.
Okay, thank you.
Make it, you violate the Open Public Meetings Act legally.
Thank you, Joan. Commissioner Spikers.
I agree with the change, especially now that we're getting, it seems we will probably be transitioning from different positions, so all of the commissioners will have a chance to be in all of the committees eventually. So that would go hand in hand with that, and I've always wondered myself why we need to have public. I wanted to just because I wanted the public to trust us. In fact, I invited people from the citizens to come to the finance
Be on the
meetings
finance
to
committee.
make sure that we were transparent. So if that should happen again, I'm sure we can revisit this.
Thank you, Commissioner Spikers. Commissioner Herron.
I know there's quite a few of us that are real strong advocates about open public meetings, but we must remember committees is not where we make decisions. It's a working committee, and we must understand that's our role. And so if, like Commissioner Young mentioned about it, there's a third wheel there that is wearing the commissioner hat, even though he or she may be public. Yeah, just making motions or whatever would be construed as, you know, making some decisions or agreeing or disagreeing with what the committee is doing. So that's, to that point, I believe we should not have an open public meetings.
Thank you for that input. I'm going to move on to section
I thought
7.
you said we were going to continue as long as people had questions.
No, that was on the
about
last,
section.
that was on the last section. This one, everybody's had a chance to be voiced.
And so then there's no further discussion,
No.
just one time is over.
One time through,
we get.
or we're going to be here all night.
Yeah, we could be. I remember the last time we were
Okay,
here. till midnight.
section 7.1. This is, under the finance committee, that language has been stricken, and it's because of the change in section 7 above. So there's really, that's either in or out, depending upon whether or not we keep the change above. And then moving on, under facilities committee, because that's the other committee that has been open, same thing goes for that, up until the point where it ends with the RCW, where it quotes RCW 4230.080. And that, again, that section is in or out, depending upon whether or not we keep the meetings open or not open. The next section is kind of a hodgepodge of different little things here, which is some cleanup. I'm going to be taking comments on this one first from Commissioner Pollard. This is where we're cleaning up titles of
Where are
officers.
you on the document?
I'm
Page
pardon?
8.
We are on page 8, thank you for asking. We're on page 8, under the section of facilities, starting with the black line text where it says the membership of the facilities committee. It's after that whole section that's been stricken out. The membership of the facilities committee shall be as follows, and we've cleaned up titles. We've just spelled out chief executive officer, chief financial and chief medical officer, stricken VPMA, took out general counsel because general counsel doesn't attend that meeting. The other thing that we've done is we've added the word facilities to better clarify that the capital needs that are reviewed by the facilities committee are facilities capital, not, for example, there could be medical equipment that doesn't come through facilities committee. The other bullet point that we've added here is consider and make recommendations on other topics related to facilities such as interior and exterior wayfinding, transportation, public safety, parking, and related items. And we added that to better reflect the work that the facilities committee actually does right now. And then we added, again, the word facilities to better clarify what kind of capital the facilities committee looks at. So, Commissioner Pollard, any thoughts on this kind of a cleanup section for the facilities committee?
There's my general comment that closing these committees to the public.
That's not on the table. We're not talking about the closing.
This is my preamble.
No.
We're not talking about that, Commissioner Pollard. You can talk about whether or not we should make these cleanup items under the Facilities Committee section, not related to open public meetings.
First of all, I would like to see us always use the term superintendent. That's the way the state defines your position, not CEO.
Very good. Thank you for that input. Anything else?
I think in all of these committees, including this one, the committee chair or the board has an opportunity to invite public members.
You're off onto the public nature of these meetings again.
No, I'm saying that in terms of listing who may attend, there is the possibility, and we used to have this to some extent with the Finance Committee, Jim Simon and the other fellow.
Commissioner Pollard, I'm going to call you out on it.
What?
You're
Point of
talking about
order.
the public nature of a committee meeting, whether or not it's open to the
No,
public.
I'm not talking about that.
And
I'm talking
inviting-
about who may serve on the committee, and that's
Well,
exactly what we're
you
addressing.
said inviting the public.
I said that,
No, you said
I
inviting
said
members of the
that-
public.
please don't interrupt me, and I won't interrupt you.
Fair.
The point is, we have had a principle, and it may be elsewhere in the bylaws, that a member of the public can be a member of this committee, can be appointed a member of this committee and function as a member of the committee, just like Jim Simon did on the Finance Committee.
Commissioner Pollard, I beg your forgiveness. I did not understand that to be the comment that you're making.
That was
I
the comment I tried to make.
I know, and I apologize.
My point is, there are people in the community who have some expertise, and they may someday want to run as commissioner, but if we could tap their expertise for a particular committee and get therefore more involvement of the community, transparency, and all those good things, then I think we should at least write in there that a member of the public may be appointed to the committee.
Good input. Thank you very
Not-
much. And again, I apologize for being a little.
I'm not talking about
short.
public comment, or anything. I'm talking about actually appointing to the committee, just like Jim Simon was.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Apologize. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Young, in terms of the cleanup items on here? Nothing? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Spikers?
Nothing, if you, just the comment that Commissioner Pollard said, you could add the committee chair can appoint a member of the public from time to time.
Okay,
If it's helpful,
Very
to the
good.
committee chair.
thank you for that. Okay, Commissioner Herron?
Yeah, I think if we were to include public membership in a committee, there should be some accountability so that whatever is being worked inside the committee must remain in the committee, and no decision should go outside or opinion of that person. You know what I'm saying? So there
They have
should
some
be,
responsibilities.
there must be some responsibility attached out by being a member of the committee.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. President Morris?
I have a similar comment already written down. Public doesn't have any skin in the game. They can come and go as they want. They aren't a regular member. Jim Simon's, the example that we've used, he would be there and then he wouldn't be there. And so you don't, it makes it difficult for the chair to lead that committee not knowing who is or isn't going to be there. So I think that it's not necessary if they come to a board meeting, which is public, and they can hear the committee reports, and the committees, usually all the committee leads are very willing to chat with the public at any time. So I'd like to keep the public out of our meetings, the committee meetings, just because it's not quite as practical as we'd hoped.
Thank you for
I
that.
double back on that, I think that's a better plan. I actually now thinking about how that.
How that works.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would agree
Commissioner
with the way it
Spikers,
was
you've
done.
modified your input
Yep.
then.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna move on to, yes? It is. Yep, we cleaned that up. Oh, the finance, Valerie has done a nice job here of pointing out that under the Finance Committee, we'll do a similar cleanup on titles that we proposed under the Facilities Committee.
I'll
Thank you.
make that, thanks.
Thank you for that, Val. Excellent. Okay, moving on, we've added a section
One more,
7.
Mr. President.
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Presider. Now, you've gone through and redlined deletions primarily, but there are other things that should be considered in revising the bylaws. And for example, there has been nothing written that said that the commissioners serving on these committees must be the chair of the committee. Pardon me.
That's not true.
And should there be something be said about who will chair these particular committees? And there are 2 commissioners. I mean, how does one determine, or does the
Trying to remember where. in the bylaw.
committee itself elect
Appointment.
the chair?
Appointments by the president.
I think that's under committee appointments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is there.
It's
Where
addressed.
is that?
I'll have to find it for you.
Skip's gonna look for that.
Okay.
Committee charters.
Chairpersons of such committees shall be appointed by the president to serve for terms not to exceed 2 years.
Where are you?
Subject both, I'm in section 7, it would be the middle of the paragraph.
Okay.
And as you get near the end of that large paragraph, under section
Right here.
7, it begins, chairpersons of such committee shall be appointed by the president to serve for terms not to exceed 2 years, subject both to removal at the will of the board and to reappointment in the sole discretion of the board. Committees of the board shall meet periodically as provided in the bylaws and as provided by resolution. So there already is an appointment and selection process for the chairs.
Thank you, Skip.
So the chairperson is actually appointed by the president, is that correct?
That's correct.
So in the case of the Finance Committee, Mr. Spikers was appointed by the president of the board.
Yes,
And similarly, the Facilities Committee, the chairperson shall be appointed by the president.
correct.
But I think,
That is how
if
the
I
bylaws-
recall this, I recall at the beginning of the year, I think the facilities did not really, was not, I think you took it upon yourself to be the chair, if I remember correctly.
Well,
Took
it doesn't have to be done annually because it's not to
At the
exceed 2
beginning.
years. So it's a
2
2-year
years.
appointment, not to exceed 2 years. It could be 1 year, 2 years. The president or the will of the board again could make that change. And what your president did is she asked for affirmation from the rest of the board. She says, I'm going to appoint, and then there was affirmation of that as well, as I recall.
Thank you,
Okay,
Skip.
One
Good
question
memory.
about 2 years, is that retroactive, or is it beginning when, so we'd start anew at this point, or we?
You mean with the bylaws redone?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'll
But
say,
no, it's
For
actually-
committee.
it's
For
actually-
or
committees,
committees,
yeah.
I'm
For
talking about
committees.
committees, does it apply retroactively to whoever was sitting as of?
Great question, we did not address retroactivity.
That's
so-
what,
so
not
we
only
will-
that, we,
It's-
many of us have been on the same committee for a very long time.
Great, so that's great input, we'll capture that idea, we did not address it, thank
Okay.
you for that.
Okay,
Okay, good input.
sorry,
Okay,
that was,
I was thinking the same thing he was.
we're going now to section 7.2, and this is where, in the committee, we talked about the fact that, I think our facilities committee, yes, our facilities committee and our medical committee have charters, finance doesn't have one yet, but we felt like it would be a good idea for that to be consistency and for a charter to exist in all of the committees and to be reflected in the bylaws. And so we're gonna start out with comments from Commissioner Young on having committee charters.
I think it's a good idea. I'm part of the medical committee, and thanks to Dr. Woodcup, we put together a charter, and it's a very workable thing.
Okay, thank you.
Useful.
Yeah, it is. Commissioner Spikers?
I'm indifferent on it, no real comments,
Okay.
I guess.
Thank you. Commissioner Herring?
I think to be in uniform, all committees should have that charter.
Okay, thank you. President Norton?
I think having a charter for the committees is a good idea. I don't know how you do it with finance, but, yeah, so I,
Okay.
I don't know if it's gonna be the same for all committees or
Well,
what it really
there-
means to have a
there's-
charter.
There's kind of a format that was developed and it can be adapted for each committee and changed over time. They can change their charters.
Okay.
Commissioner Pollard, thoughts on having a charter?
Yeah, I think that charter needs to be defined. It can be
Yeah.
anything somebody calls a charter, I suppose. So I think we have something more precise in mind than just a charter. There should be a definition of what we're talking about.
That's great input. Not unlike the fact that we say we have an agenda for every meeting, and we actually have a suggested layout for what an agenda looks like. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and now with respect to the committees, the quality committee often is ignored or not mentioned. Shouldn't the quality committee be listed and also have a charter?
Great input. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yep, it is an important
Comment to
committee.
that? Isn't quality committee one that we is not open to the public?
That's true, but it still
so it's
would
medical.
benefit from having a charter. Good, thank you very much. Okay, good feedback. Let's turn a few more pages here.
Who mentioned that? I just do it.
For the.
The quality committee.
That was
Yeah, thank you,
Commissioner Pollard.
I'm running as fast as I can.
Okay, let's all turn to page 11. And I'm going to draw our attention to subsection 5 in there, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is just a typo. Okay? So we're going to move on then to the next
So
subsection.
what's a typo?
Oh,
Because
it
I have
was-
all these notes about
Okay.
this.
Subsection 5, we replaced the word his. It's not really a typo, it's just up to there. We made it non-gender. Page 11, subsection 5, reads 5.
Yeah.
We replaced the word his. Oh, no.
The one is to them.
Yeah, okay,
Yep,
got that,
yep,
that's okay,
okay.
all right.
Okay, so I don't think there'll probably be anybody have a problem with that one. We'll go to the next section then, and this is a section where we want to affirm that people don't, commissioners, while in office, don't try to secure for themselves special privileges because they're in that office, such as compensation other than what they're supposed to receive, gifts, rewards, gratuities. They will not engage in business or professional activity that might reasonably require them to, by reason of their position, to disclose confidential information, nor use that information for their own personal gain. This is really a conflict of interest section. I think we started with Joan last time, so Commissioner Spikers, thoughts on this section?
Well, the only thing is, what is special privileges? Because when I call, you folks are very responsive,
Oh.
and to me, that's a special privilege to get in to talk to you. And
Okay.
so, that's a little vague, special privileges. You could,
I look at that as part and parcel of the relationship that the
Mhm.
administration has with its commissioners.
I would agree.
and if I want to use a service, medical service, I never say I'm the commissioner, obviously,
I
but
don't either.
I bet there are some that know who I am, you know.
That's an unavoidable special
So,
privilege.
And I just don't want to be labeled getting special privileges just because I work as a commissioner.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I think that this is a very good section. That's why when someone says, when they ask, where they call and they have a medical malpractice action, I said, where's it at first? So, you'd be surprised sometimes whether they're valid or not. Most
Yeah.
people that call for those are invalid.
Okay. Good input, thank you. Maybe we'll try to find some wording that satisfies your concern over special privileges. Thank you. Commissioner Herron.
Yeah, again, on the special privileges, so if, let's say a commissioner is attending a a workshop here in the hospital and introducing himself, I'm so-and-so commissioner. Would that be a special privilege definition when you're including or introducing yourself as a commissioner of this hospital? Would that be looked upon
That
as?
would be a good thing
Would
to
that be
just
looked
say
upon
that
as
you're
a?
interested in the
Oh,
hospital.
okay.
Yep.
They're not gonna give us a special art and crafts to.
It's good to show you're out in the
Yeah, I
community.
think that would be good to
I know,
come in here.
hopefully.
Good.
All right.
Okay, thank you. President Morris?
I have a comment here. Can bylaws override public vote? And does the public okay the vote on anything that we do?
Can bylaws override a public vote? I'm not sure. Say more about that.
I'm not sure. It says the public or private, which could create conflicts between duties, interests, and opportunities inherent to such office.
I'm sorry, where are you?
That's that paragraph, right? Right above, we're right in the middle. Hold
Okay.
any office, engage in any employment, or occupy any position. I'm on page 11.
Yeah, on number 4, section 4.
Yeah,
Five.
yeah, actually
Oh,
4.
you're up above.
Hold in the
Oh,
office,
We
above
didn't
5.
discuss that.
Yeah, well, that's why he asked me, so that's the first thing on this page that I had questions about.
Yeah, that is mostly trying to represent what's called incompatibility of office, where you can't hold two offices, elected officials, that would be incompatible.
Yeah.
You couldn't be a county commissioner and a county
Hospital commissioner.
district hospital.
Okay.
You could be a prosecuting attorney, though, and a commissioner on the public hospital district. So you have to look at the statutes and kind of define those as when do you have incompatible offices? When can you not hold similar or like offices? So I think that's really what's intended there is you can't engage in employment or another occupy any position, public or private, that creates a conflict for those duties.
Okay,
That's what
Yeah.
that's intended to
Okay.
address.
okay, thank you. Other than that, let's see.
On that,
Yeah.
on that red line, we're
Yeah,
in this section.
yeah.
Yeah.
Special privileges, I got that, okay. Physician disclose confidential information. I think confidential might need a little bit more definition, or examples,
What that
because,
constitutes, okay,
yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
just a couple examples, so that we make sure we're conforming to what we need to.
Or proprietary.
Yeah, that might be a better.
Well, confidential is defined by itself. It's information that cannot be shared unless you're required to share it by law. That's what confidential is. But what we could put in there is, we could put confidential information obtained in executive sessions or through your role as a commissioner, something like that. We can define that. We can
Okay.
maybe look at that. a
There's
little bit.
something in the quality committee or something.
Yeah.
Mhm. We'll take a look at that, how we might define
Good
that.
input, thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Commissioner Pollard?
Going back to what Daryl raised with item 4, I think that needs to be clarified. It looks like it's overly restrictive, and what I'd like to see is the RCW cited that might refer to that. So it's not just what somebody thinks, but it's actually according to the law, that there should not be a conflict of interest there. Going down then to item 5, I agree with Board President that the confidential information needs to be further identified and clarified, and obviously one is what Skip mentioned, which is information gained in executive session, and that's state law, actually, and we could also cite the RCW there too. But anybody can call an email that they send to someone confidential, and this would tend to preclude the sharing of that, and that's a little bit too much.
I will comment on that though, and that is with respect to, and we cover this in our new employee orientation, and we let every employee here know that any email that they send through their district account is automatically not confidential.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you for that input.
Well, and I just feel that, just as the President said, we need to identify what is confidential and what isn't. Just because someone sends an email and says this is confidential,
Right.
and then it comes to your point that no emails are confidential.
Right.
But apart from that, let's say they get a letter, and the person says, treat this as confidential. Is that good enough? I mean,
It is not.
anybody can call anything confidential,
Right.
and then it would, this provision would tend to interfere with that.
Call a dog a cat, it doesn't make it a cat.
Exactly. All right, so that
Okay.
has to do with item 5 there that is not being revised.
Anything else on item
And
5?
Item 5, the red line, is that what you're?
Yep, that's what we're on.
Okay. When Commissioners Jones and Howley left, they received rather expensive glass gifts from the district. And I think we should avoid giving expensive gifts to employees who depart. A plaque or something simple, and a certificate, a plaque is reasonable, but expensive glass, blown glass gifts, I think was not reasonable. And so this would tend to preclude that if we enforce it. So I think we should avoid making exceptions. If we're going to make this the rule, then even though the person may be the most popular in the world, we shouldn't go spend public money to get an expensive gift.
Great, thank you very much. Anything else, Commissioner Pollard, on that section?
Yes, and it says here about a commissioner is precluded while in office from accepting or seeking employment with the hospital district. We had a situation in 2011 where Fritz Ryberry quit his job as marketing director and was immediately given a $100,000 job as a marketing director. He quit his position as a commissioner and was appointed immediately to become marketing director at a salary of about $100,000. And in the federal government, if you leave the Congress, you cannot be employed by the federal government for a period of 4 or 5 years. I think we need a period of time
We actually
specified.
We actually did some research on this. Skip did a position or a what are we calling it?
Little issue paper.
An issue paper on this. We did do research specific to that point. We spent a lot of time on this, and what we found is that once a commissioner becomes a non-commissioner, there is no legal means by which we could limit their eligibility for employment.
I just draw the parallel with those who are elected to the Congress, and when they're
Congress has a
defeated and
specific
they leave the
statute.
Congress, they cannot get a job with the federal government for a period of time.
Does
by
not
the-
apply.
That's the federal statute, the CFRs require.
Yeah.
But
We don't
that
have
doesn't
that in the
apply here.
state.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we're sure that does not apply
It's not
under
apples
state
and oranges.
RCW?
Does not, we looked into that.
All right, well, I think it should. So
Thank you.
somebody that knows.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Young.
I just think this is good. Having been employed in the medical field for 100 years, I have been taught all too well what can be revealed, what can't be, what you can't do,
And how to say it,
and how to say it,
exactly how to say it.
Okay,
and how to walk away.
thank you very much. Okay, next section that has a change.
Point of order, may I ask another question for clarification?
Sure.
And I made the point about no expensive gifts for departing people or for whatever reason, because this would apply to all commissioners. Should we specify that any gift should not exceed $25, or maybe that's getting too much into the details, but we should be able to present a gift, but it should be limited.
I think we can work on some language around that, probably using the term de minimis, and that way it will live on as things inflate, that we don't put a dollar
Yeah,
figure
right,
in.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I believe there's something like that, there's, it's stated on the RCW that there's a limit $20, no more than $20. I remember reading that particular.
Very good. Okay, well,
So it's in the statute.
Skip's captured that, we'll take a look at that. Subsection 7, we're not gonna spend any time on it, that was just to add the she gender there. The next one to talk about is subsection 8. And this is,
Can we go back, because I don't know if I made a comment on the confidential information, because
Well-
I needed to talk about when we are looking at affiliation and you put on the, and then the public can still see it on our website, although that is, we're talking about keeping that confidential, but sometimes I think it is placed on our,
yeah, what?
and it becomes a public information.
Yeah. Once we discuss something in this group, in a board meeting, it is public.
Public information.
Correct.
But sometimes you say this is public, this is confidential, but then it's on there. Okay,
I
just
don't
wanted to
recall that, but
clarify, yeah.
Once we've talked about it here,
Just
it
wanna make
is
sure.
public information.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we've added subsection 8, and this is having the commissioners and the officers of the corporation, that would be the CEO, CFO, CMO, completing conflict of interest statements. Now, you may ask the question, well, where is the conflict of interest statement? The committee and the board would have to develop one and approve the conflict of interest statement. This is just in the bylaws that a conflict of interest statement is done on an annual basis. And so we're gonna start with Commissioner Herring for comments on having a conflict of interest statement signed annually.
Mhm. I agree, I think we
Okay.
should, that way we can recuse ourselves if necessary.
Very good, thank you.
I have yes already written down with an
Good
explanation
on that,
mark.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Pollard?
Yeah, I agree generally, but one of the problems is defining conflict of interest, which is not fully defined elsewhere in the bylaws. And so the question then becomes, is there an obligation on the part of other commissioners to flag for the commission the apparent or the appearance of conflict of interest of other commissioners or employees of the district? Is it our responsibility, if we know of a commissioner that has a conflict of interest, to say something about it, or must we keep our silence?
Okay, but we did address that. Thank you for that input. We did not talk about reporting on other potential conflicts. This was specific to reporting on your own. So thank you for that. I hadn't thought about that. We'll capture that and discuss in the group. Thank you. Commissioner Young, any comments on the conflict of interest? Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Spikers?
No, I don't have an issue with that. I just wondering if that is duplicative of the F1 supplemental public disclosure statement
wondering that too.
every year that I fill out. And it seems to me that it's duplicative. So, I don't know, and that goes to
EDC
the
doesn't
public.
identify conflicts, it identifies where you have interest. It's a financial statement, it's called an F1 financial information statement. So it's really talking about your finances, wherein it doesn't ask you if you serve on other boards or if you have an interest in other
Okay.
committees, those kind of things. So this would be a little bit different.
Well, F1 is something required by the Public Disclosure Commission.
Correct.
So where is F1 in this?
We don't pertain to F1 here, it's not addressed in your bylaws. I think Commissioner Spiker's point was, isn't this somewhat duplicative of what you already do for the F1?
county.
The F1 only collects financial information. They ask you about stocks and bonds, they ask you about your spouse, where she's employed, where you're employed, so it's
How much
really
money in savings?
compensations.
I
Yeah.
thought Mr. Spikers was calling attention to another provision. in
No,
the
no,
bylaws.
no, this is the
Okay.
annuals that we put.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Every April
That's
15th.
PDC
Yeah.
business.
That's right. Every April 15th, if you don't turn it in on time, you get a $150 fine. I'm doing a couple appeals now for some commissioners.
All right.
Not ours.
Not yours.
Okay, thank you. We're going to turn quite a few pages now. We're going to turn to page 16. And this is a section on the foundation, under Article 5, Hospital Foundation. Section 1, we're going to start this section with Commissioner Norris, but I'm going to mention a couple things that are in here that we're taking a look at in this round. And that is, first of all, might be helpful to read this sentence. The Hospital Foundation, this is the second sentence under independent organization. The Hospital Foundation shall function under Hospital Foundation bylaws, which shall be developed and adopted by the Hospital Foundation, subject to approval of the Board of Commissioners. This is a change. This is saying that the foundation does need to live under the approval of this body here. The second change is an addition, and that's the red line text at the bottom of the page, where it says that the Hospital Foundation or any foundation bearing King County Public Hospital District Number 4, Snoqualmie Valley Hospital, doing business as the DBA, may only operate with the concurrence and approval of the Hospital District Board of Commissioners, and all donated funds shall be used only to support the hospital district programs or district-approved capital equipment purchases or projects. This is to make sure that the Hospital Foundation and its work is aligned with the rest of the district. President Norris.
My question to you is, do we still have a foundation?
We have one, technically, but it has not been meeting.
Okay. I don't have any problem with this. I think that's the way it should be.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pollard.
Yeah, I'm just now reading this. I didn't read it before. One thing I'd suggest is the Hospital Foundation or any foundation bearing the name of, we should insert bearing the name of
Missing the name.
the King County Public Hospital District Number 4.
What would it have the name of? It should be legal.
Now, doing business as, it looks like it's out of place. Public Hospital District Number 4,
That's a
DBA, Snoqualmie Valley Hospital,
We'll flip it around.
may only operate with concurrence and approval by the Hospital District Board of Commissioners. And do we need to spell out the whole title, hospital board? We're talking about this in different places, and sometimes we just say the Board of Commissioners or this, that. Do we have to do the whole
Consistent.
sentence there? Hospital District Board of Commissioners, and all donated funds shall be used only to support the hospital district programs or district-approved capital equipment purchases or projects. If they want to buy donuts for the foundation, it looks like they got to get our approval. I think that's not what we intend here. But all donated funds shall be used only to support the hospital district programs. Some of it could be used for incidental expenses of the foundation itself.
correct.
And that somehow work that.
They are a program themselves, so it would be
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
All right, so that's my comment.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Young?
Well, I just am looking forward to having the foundation become an up and moving project.
Very good.
Again.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Spikers?
No comment, I like it.
Okay. And then Commissioner Herron?
Yeah, the hospital foundation is de facto, it's not moving, it's somewhat,
Correct.
we need to resurrect it, and how we do we resurrect this? Because all the, well, we call it the board that are still, are not acknowledging the foundation. There's no interest in any of these people. We've tried this, so how do we resurrect this?
I think that's a discussion for another
Oh, no,
night.
I know, thank you, but I just wanted, since we are on the hospital foundation, it's fine, it's okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
thank
just
you.
wanted to make that comment, but
Okay.
yes, thank you.
You know what? We are down to the very last change.
Could I have additional comments on this piece? And the foundation, that is. And what, we've run into a problem where this is not what's occurring. It says the district may from time to time assign a district employee to serve as executive director of the hospital foundation, et cetera, and a portion of some of the time of that employee. What we have done in practice is there has been the hiring of an outside executive director of the hospital foundation. And then more recently, we've avoided calling that person an executive director.
That's fine, no, that's
I'm
not.
thinking of Eric and,
We've,
They're gone. Can we talk
ever
about
since
that
I,
later?
ever since I've been here, all the foundation directors have been employees of the hospital district.
well, we've had Eric Kaltenbach, and he was called he was called director, was he not?
He was
Executive
He was
director.
executive director of the foundation, and he was on our books as an employee of the district.
Oh, we put him on our books as a,
Correct.
so, and the same thing with Scott Scowcroft?
Correct, all
They
employees
were
of the
made
district.
employees and then assigned to the foundation?
Correct,
Oh, okay. I didn't
very
realize
common
that.
practice, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, anything else? All right, let's move on to the last page. This is page 18. And this is the, what was that, hanging participle?
Yeah,
Of the bylaws. This is
A useless appendage?
Yeah.
Some sort of useless
So,
appendage.
this is, we're gonna remove our appendix here. And it's not that we don't follow this, but it's not necessary in the bylaws to call this out. And that is that, we can charge, I mean, that's in the RCW, it's just not,
Okay.
needed in the bylaws.
In fact, you can charge by space and amount and use, and Steve's got all kinds of documents now on how he can charge for it.
Okay, so any thoughts on that section, the removal of this public disclosure cost? We actually have this represented on our website under public records requests, so it's noticed there.
Okay.
Okay?
So, what did you say about the state requires, or the
State
state
allows.
provides for us to recover some costs?
They allow us to, correct.
And we don't want to, is that what we're saying?
Oh, no, I'm just,
We do want to.
we
just
do
don't
want
have
to.
note it in the
It just
bylaws.
doesn't need to be in the bylaws. It's
Oh,
noted,
it doesn't have to be in the
yeah,
bylaws.
it's noted on the website
No,
where
there's
you, yeah.
a website which
Yep.
people make
You got it.
requests, okay.
Yep.
So on this same page though, do we need to say Ariel Norris, president and commissioner? This is rather awkward, we've never done it that way before. Emma Herron, vice president and commissioner. I don't know, it just seems like secretary and commissioner, et cetera. It just seems like
Oh, I see, he's talking
it's
Oh, yeah.
strange way
Oh,
to
the very
title
end.
these positions.
Okay, a little long on the words.
That's how it was in your previous.
It was, yep, yep.
Well, I mean, isn't it assumed that this is commissioner, and so they're just vice president, president, and secretary?
And then you have your two commissioners,
And
it works.
why do you need to say again that they're commissioners?
Okay.
Well, at any rate, that's-
Very good.
Just that they know they're part of the commission.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Me too.
That's it. So here's what we're gonna do. The committee, Skip's got all the feedback. It'll come back to the committee. The committee will produce the blue line version that is all this input. And then get it back to you as soon as possible, so it's ready for you to vote on at the November 8th meeting. The other thing that we have for you tonight is the red line, blue line version of the rules of procedure. So what you're gonna get is for your study, ahead of the November 8th meeting, is you can now see in writing on this latest version, your input from the work study session we did on rules of procedure. And you'll get a very similar version of the bylaws to what you're getting right now on rules of procedure.
So the ad hoc committee members, you got, in addition to the red line, blue line, you got the committee meeting minutes from yesterday.
Yes.
I already drafted
Thank
those
you.
up this morning, I got those to you, and attached to that is your cover memo. But the red line, blue line, and again, I'll just kind of describe what that means, is we had red lines that we brought to the workshop last time, and the blue line now are comments that we have added as an ad hoc committee based on the reflections and your suggestions. So this would now be, the process is your board meeting on November 8th, you'll be presented this document again, and we'll ask you to adopt it, and then you'll go through that process where the debate will start occurring.
This document, which one are you referring to there?
Rules of procedures and the bylaws.
Okay, so these documents.
These documents, you'll
Okay,
get
this
both those
document.
documents.
Skip Skip, Val was reminding me that you had actually mentioned this in the ad hoc group, that at the November meeting, it's an introduction of those documents.
Yes,
And
so
then,
your bylaws read, and you can turn to them since you have them there. Turn to the very last amendment piece. I'll tell you how these have to be approved. Article 9 amendments, the very last page, and it says, these bylaws may be amended by resolution of the board introduced at a regular meeting. So we're going to introduce them on November 8th and at a regular meeting and adopt it at a subsequent regular meeting. It doesn't need to be the next regular meeting, but it has to be a subsequent one. What you can't do is change your bylaws in one meeting. You have to introduce them, present them, and then at a subsequent meeting you adopt them.
Okay.
So here's a little bit of the dilemma that my bylaws committee has is, in order for us to turn around so you'll have a red line, blue line version of this for your November 8th, we need to meet once more between now and November 8th to get that done for you.
the ad hoc committee, not the
Yeah.
board.
Just the ad hoc
Yeah.
committee.
Okay.
Because we're gonna take everything I've done, and last time I had 5 pages of notes. This time I'm gonna have about 10 pages of notes that I'll make you folks sit through. I'll torture you a little bit as we go through those. And then we'll get to a blue line. And then we'll be able to, on November 8th, present red line, blue lines, versions of both of these for debate, motions, acceptance, deliberation, etc. But you can't adopt them. Remember, you can only introduce them. This is like kind of a dating process. You get introduced, and then later you can get married, but not at that same meeting.
Later would be December, January, February.
Correct.
you know.
That's exactly right, Commissioner Pollard.
Yeah.
Before the end of December, or,
Are you still running the meeting there?
Thank you for asking. I'm going to turn it all back over to our president because I'm done facilitating the input part. Thank you.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Pollard has a comment, President Marsh.
Yeah, I think that was a very wise thing we put in the bylaws, which is that it can be introduced at one meeting and then in a subsequent meeting will be passed. And I think there are many things that we haven't addressed, we have not addressed in the bylaws, including that very point, and that is, we should ensure that when a resolution comes forward, that it cannot be introduced and passed at the same meeting. That's very unusual that we have done that sometimes.
Any resolution?
Any resolution should be introduced at one
One
meeting
meeting,
and have at least one
That's
reading
never
of
happened,
it.
I guarantee it.
And then pass
No,
on
it's slow
subsequent
things
meeting.
down.
it does slow things down.
Anyway,
Pardon, I'm sorry.
sorry, I interrupted. I shouldn't have.
Well, I just think there are many
For the
things
sake
that
of
are
it.
not mentioned in these bylaws that I presume can be brought up later.
I guess you can bring it up at the
I-
meeting. We've been collecting information
Yeah.
for the last 10 months.
Yes, but we're only looking at red lines and blue lines. We didn't add, what about global
No.
changes?
We actually petitioned everybody for their input, and that's
We
what,
asked to provide it at meetings, to provide it in emails,
Okay.
to give it to Tom. We collected all that in the very first 2 meetings where we had emails and suggestions and comments from everyone. And
right.
Yeah, we
hopefully you
have.
found
The
this.
solicitor- Yeah, the solicitor.
You found yours.
That's very fine, but as we work the bylaws, we can come up with other ideas that need to be in the bylaws.
Well, those
No,
bylaws have
then
been,
why have a committee?
I'm just describing the process. What we
Right.
agreed to do was solicit input
Yeah,
from all the commissioners
yeah.
to go to the committee. Then the committee worked, and I'm telling you, that this process was work, taking each one of those suggestions, doing research on them. Skip did a mountain of work on those, so that things that were brought back to this session and the one before was based on all that research, and then go through approval, so that the time to submit ideas for changes to the bylaws was at the very beginning.
Yeah.
You guys can, of course, change anything you want in the process, but I'm just describing what was designed and how it was supposed to work.
As I recall, we got one comment from commissioners, and that was from Commissioner Spikers. That was the only comment that came back from commissioners. I intended to offer additional thoughts in a meeting like this, but we're only working with red lines and blue lines.
let me remind you, Commissioner Pollard, I think you and I have talked about some of the issues that you have about the bylaws, and I shared that with the committee. One of which is the conflict of interest based on the previous, what you just gave an example about Mr. Wright Berry. That was one of your conflict of interest issue. So I brought that up, so you did make a comment.
Well,
And so so let me just remind you, you and I have several discussions on some of your issues, and I did share that with the committee.
That's fine.
Okay.
I have more to share either with the.
Yeah, please,
either with
because
the-
we've been-
Either
we've
with
been-
the commission or with the public.
Because the
It's
problem is
missing
we
this.
worked so hard on this,
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Pollard.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've had enough discussion. I think we're going overboard right now.
I make a motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Before I just want to
Opposed?
thank for everybody for your
Wait,
comments.
you can't,
I'm opposed to closing the meeting because I think we could do further discussion on bylaws.
okay, your opposition is noted.
Thank you.
All those in favor of dismissing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Commissioner Pollard. Okay.
Okay.
Let the record
Thank
show
you so
that.
much for
Thank
doing
you
this.
for everybody's feedback.